All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Ziegler, and I have the pleasure and privilege of serving as the Chief Impact Officer at the Community Foundation of Greater Greensboro. I am delighted to welcome you to our 2025 Grants and Initiatives Application Workshop. More importantly, I also have the pleasure of introducing the amazing people that form the Grants and Initiatives team. Dr. Blake Noel is a director on our team and is instrumental in sourcing and grant making. Megan Quinones is a program officer here at the foundation who's been doing wonderful work and our resident food security expert. And Amber Smith, she keeps the trains on time and more importantly, keeps my head on straight. She's our admin assistant, but does wonderful things for us as a team and also the foundation. It's a pleasure to work with, collaborate with each and every one of them. Today, our purpose is to help you navigate our application process, understand our funding priorities, and improve your chances of success. But before we move forward, I want to state something very clear. Nothing we say or review on this webinar guarantees funding. As we move forward, I want to lay out how we will spend our time together. We will discuss eligibility requirements, program areas. We will provide an overview of the application, the 2025 timeline, reporting, and at the end, we will have some time to answer a few questions. Over the past 20 months sitting in this seat, I have learned a lot about our community, a lot about community foundations across the country, and also the overall funder ecosystem in our city. As a community foundation, the vast majority of our funding is not discretionary. In 2024, we received $9 million in requests for only $400,000 in available funding. Our process is highly competitive. Our focus is impact, not volume, and we encourage thoughtful, meaningful proposals that not only align with our strategic focus areas, but also co-create solutions that positively impact our community. I'm going to pass the mic over to Blake Noel, who will review eligibility.
Good morning, everybody. So, thinking about who is eligible to apply for our grants, you must be a 501c3 registered nonprofit. You must be located in or serving Greensboro and/or Guilford County. Requests may be up to $25,000 in the open request. As we work to prioritize equity in our grant making, board and staff diversity, along with total operating budget, will be considered by staff and the grant making committees. All applications will be reviewed regardless of budget size, though. Priority is given to grant proposals that focus on long-term strategies to advance and sustain the Community Foundation's focus on cultural vibrancy, economic mobility, and health and wellness. We also want to make sure that we're clear about who is not eligible to apply. Grants are not awarded to individuals. Grants are not awarded to organizations who are currently in year one of a 2-year grant. Public schools and other public agencies are not eligible, although they may be involved as partners in funded efforts. The Community Foundation does not fund sponsorships and festivals. Grants are not awarded to organizations with outstanding grant reports. So if you have paper out there still and you want to apply for this cycle, make sure you get it in before applying for another grant. Prospective applicants are advised to carefully review the eligibility criteria prior to initiating the application process. Feel free to submit any eligibility-related questions in the chat. We will do our best to address them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We are now going to provide an overview of the Community Foundation's 2025 program areas, and I'll pass it to Megan.
Good morning, everyone. So glad to be here with you today. Yes, we are now going to provide an overview of our 2025 program areas. At the Community Foundation, we recognize that health and wellness is a foundational component of any thriving community. One of our focuses within the health and wellness program area is on elder care, specifically capital cost, capital expansions, or capital equipment for elder care facilities throughout Greensboro. When we say elder care, we mean that more than 51% of the population served should be age 55 years or older. For those interested in applying for the WILE Fund or capital expansions for elder care, please reach out directly to grants@cfgg.org as we will consider those proposals on a case-by-case basis. Another focus within our health and wellness program area is direct health services for uninsured and underinsured populations in Guilford, Randolph, and Rockingham County. Uninsured populations are typically not covered by private or public insurance, whereas underinsured populations typically fall into a coverage gap where they may have insurance but not the financial resources to secure quality care. Our final focus within our health and wellness program area is food access, increasing access to fresh, healthy, and nourishing food in Guilford County. Another one of our program areas at the Community Foundation is cultural vibrancy. A culturally vibrant Greensboro is a community where all residents have access to diverse cultural, educational, and natural resources. This year, the Community Foundation is interested in funding projects which will bring diverse, multi-generational audiences together across lines of difference. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Noel to talk more about our final program area.
For residents to become economically viable, they must have a strong economic foundation. With that, the Community Foundation is committed to funding organizations whose work encompasses the following: workforce development and education, small business and entrepreneurship, and access to workforce housing. We focus on programs that develop talent and provide access to opportunity in Greensboro and throughout Guilford County. And I'll pass it to Amber.
All right, let's take a moment and go over the application timeline and what to expect throughout the process. First, the timeline. This year's application window will be open on Sunday, June 1st, and will close on Tuesday, July 15th. Make sure you mark your calendars for those very important dates. Only completed applications that are submitted by the July 15th deadline will be reviewed. Any application that is incomplete or submitted after the deadline will not be eligible. No exceptions. Once you receive your application, here's what happens next. First, an internal diligence review. Then your application moves to a committee recommendation stage. And after that, it will go to a decision and by the board will decide who will get funding. If your application is approved, funding will be dispersed in January of 2026. So please keep that in mind when planning your project timeline and resource needs. I will now pass the mic over to Megan.
Thank you. We also want to share some tips today for a strong and successful application. Provide clear and a compelling case for impact. Depth over breadth, meaning sometimes one clear idea is better than 10. Provide clear responses that answer the questions being asked. Utilize the budget template. And let's talk about passwords. If you forgot your password, there is a button on the online grant portal login page right under the password button that says "Forgot password?" ? We encourage you to try this option before reaching out to staff to reset your password. However, if you are unsure whether or not your organization has an existing account on our online grant portal. We ask that you reach out to grants@cfgg.org and we can recover that information for you. And I'm going to pass it back over to Dr. Noel.
Thank you. So in thinking about the application and the focus on impact, we wanted to share with you a tool that we believe can support structuring the thinking and being very careful about the hypothesis for the project. So what you see in front of you is a logic model from Kellogg. It seems very intense, but it's actually pretty straightforward. It's a series of if-then statements. So if we have these resources being material, it could be staff, it could be social, it could be capital, it could be any number of things that you can bring to bear for this effort. If we have these resources, what are the activities that we're going to do? Activities are typically what people think about as programming. So when you're going to have the after school meeting or when you're going to have the event, right? If we do these activities, what are the outputs that we can expect and that we can collect on the backside? Outputs are the things you can count. How many people attended the event, demographic information for the people that came to your program, and also anything about participants, right? So what are the numbers that you can collect right after you do an activity? If we achieve these outputs, then what are the outcomes that we're going to see? Outcomes, the way to think about outcomes is by virtue of participating in an activity or a program, what is the participant able to do, know, or experience going forward? Outcomes are really where it's at. So outputs are things you can collect. They're the numbers. They're very important. But outcomes are really what we're unlocking for people to be able to do going forward. And ultimately, if we achieve these short and long-term outcomes, what is the impact we will see? So if we win in the long-term future by doing great work, what do we hope to achieve? A couple of things just to flag for you. As you're thinking about your application, make sure that you have a way that you're going to be able to document the outputs. So who's going to track it, who's going to collect it, who's going to manage that data, and make sure you're very clear about the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. So when we do these programs, what do we think is how is it going to benefit community or individuals going forward in their lives? And with that, I will pass it back to our fearless leader, Brandon Ziegler.
Thank you, Blake. Now it's time to invite a few audience questions. We will start with questions that were submitted with webinar registrations. We also encourage you to submit questions via the chat function, which will be monitored by our team. Any follow-up inquiries or questions can be directed to grants@cfgg.org.
All right. Question number 1. Are general operating requests feasible for this grant period?
Yes, they are. However, we encourage you to consider your project request in totality, as our due diligence process and our budget process account for overhead for grant programming.
Will every applicant be selected for a site visit?
No. Organizations will be selected for a site visit only on a case-by-case basis. Organizations that are selected to undergo a site visit will be contacted early to mid-August. More importantly, site visit participation will consist of our team members and committee members who are community leaders.
Is your grant program open to applications from newly established or first-year nonprofit organizations?
It absolutely is. We believe all organizations have the potential for outstanding impact in our community.
What are sustainable ways to ensure funding from year to year? And what do you look for in deciding whether a program has quality?
Honestly, there's no guarantee for year-to-year funding unless you're awarded a multi-year grant. Things we look for: impact, organizations that capture outputs such as the number of attendees, demographics of those impacted, and zip codes of geographies where they're having this impact, and also outcomes. Outcomes, meaning by virtue of participating, what are beneficiaries able to do, know, or experience? What kind of solutions are contributing to creating a better ecosystem in our city and our county? And the third I'll mention is financial sustainability. We all discuss financial sustainability, and we want to make sure that our partners are working to make sure they are sustainable and around for the long haul.
What is some advice you give to nonprofits on grant writing?
The first, start early. As you've already heard, applications submitted past the deadline will not be considered. Create a logic model to guide your proposal. Clearly answer the questions that are being asked. And for additional support, please check in with the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium.
Right. And one more question. Which is more important to the foundation, funding new programs or funding long-running, proving successful programs?
We believe both are meaningful and important, and we will not exclude anyone who is new to the ecosystem or a new nonprofit or those who've been around for a long time. Again, we're focused on impact in the application process and making sure that the dollars we disperse and the organizations we partner with are co-creating solutions that are meaningful for our community. Now we'll pivot to a few questions that are in the chat.
Will the logic model be located on your website?
Yes, we'll make sure, well, it won't be on the website, but it'll be a part of the application when you log in and start working on your application.
In just a moment, I'm
Another question that I think is really important. Is there a certain size of an organization budget or project budget that will not be considered for funding? We'll consider all sizes, but please understand again, we're talking about roughly $350,000 to $400,000 of funding that is discretionary managed by our team. So we look to make sure that organizations with that right size their budget are having impact regardless of the size. So if your project is large, do not be afraid to submit it. However, also be aware that we're considering a number of opportunities across a small budget.
Are there any match requirements?
I'm sorry, will you repeat that, Amber?
Are there any matching requirements?
That's on a case by case basis. Some grants will have matching grants, will have matching requirements, and some will not. We will work with each individual partner to craft the right funding proposal in regards to that part of the diligence process.
And that is it for now.
There is another question that I think is really important. Organizations are able to use fiscal sponsors. So do not be afraid. If your project, if your organization is under the umbrella of another nonprofit, that is totally acceptable. We'll just dig in on some of the budget of what that looks like and how that plays out.
All right. Do your discretionary dollars include your distributions that will be made from the WOW Fund?
WOW Fund is a separate fund and entity. While it's discretionary and we manage, we look at it as a separate entity because it's specifically focused on capital expenditures for facilities that are catering to senior populations.
Is there a certain size organizational budget or project budget that will be considered for funding?
Again, no, we'll look at all organizations, all sizes, and all funding. But again, be aware we're looking for a right size budget compared to impact to discover that throughout the due diligence process. There's another question here about tracking numbers and software. We do not require certain software programs to track numbers. Basically, when it comes to our metrics and evaluation process, we rely on our partners to track that the best way possible that's meaningful for them. And we will talk to each individual partner that proceeds through our diligence process to understand specifically how they're tracking metrics and evaluation.
We are unable to answer all questions in the chat at this time. Please feel free to reach out to grants@cmgg.org for any, project specific or your organizational specific questions?
There will be a number of organizations that will be submitting grants for several projects, and that is fine if you're actually submitting a application for different projects. However, understand that we do pay close attention to that and making sure that all of our funding is not directed to one organization based off of several projects. So feel free to submit for different projects, especially if they're in different program areas, but know that we will consider that throughout the application process. So with that, we're grateful for our time today. Thank you for joining us. A recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees as soon as we wrap. Well, not as soon as we wrap up, but shortly thereafter. Again, we're grateful for you joining us today. Thank you so much.